welcome to the York Festival of Ideas. I'm Terry O'Connor from the University of York, and I'm your chair for this event, Flagship of Early England, Reconstructing the Sutton Hoo ship. Before we get into that, a few technical notes. If you're watching live, you can ask questions using the Q&A button on your screen. This will be available all the way through the event, so questions can be asked at any time, and we'll go through as many of them as time allows after the talk. Should you have any technical issues, such as a loss of Wi-Fi, you can rejoin the event using the original link. It should take you straight back in. And subtitles are available for this event. To turn these on or off, use the CC Live Transcript button at the bottom of your screen. So to our speaker, Martin Carver has been a professional archaeologist since 1974 and has excavated and researched in England, Scotland, Ireland, France, Italy, Sicily, and Algeria. He directed the latest campaign of research at Sutton Hoo from 1983 to 2005, and is still closely involved with the site. Martin founded the Sutton Hoo Society in 1984 and has lectured on the find in Europe and America. In 1986, Martin was appointed professor and head of the Department of Archaeology at the University of York. And in retirement, he's continued to serve the university as an emeritus professor. Excuse me. The site in 1939 at Sutton Hoo in East Suffolk, landowner Mrs Edith Pretty and archaeologist Basil Brown found, more or less by chance, the imprint of a spectacular 90-foot-long rowing ship. As I'm sure you all know, the most wonderful range of artifacts was discovered, conserved, repaired, restored, and are now on display in the British Museum, but the boat itself has never been reconstructed until now. To make this happen, the Sutton Hoo Ships Company was formed. The goal is to examine the archaeological findings and build a full-size reconstruction of the ship in all her glory. Once the ship is built, an exploration of the major English rivers and shorelines familiar to the earliest English will begin to learn how these waters served 7th century people and to encourage our own generations to give them new respect today. And we're delighted that Martin, chair, or should it be skipper, of the Sutton Hoo Ships Company, is joining us here today to tell us more. Martin, welcome, and over to you.
Finally. Thank you very much indeed, Terry. That's very kind of you. And I'd just like to say hello to everybody. Thank you very much for finding time to look over some of our research. I can't see you, but I will do my very best to share the excitement with you. Steve, can we have the slides, please? Lovely. Okay, well, our story starts in 1939 at the site of Sutton Hoo, which I hope is on your screen. This is when the mounds that you see in the foreground there were first examined scientifically. They stand beside the River Deben in Suffolk. You can see the Deben snaking away towards the North Sea there. And the earliest excavations, next slide, please, began with Mrs. Pretty, who employed Basil Brown as her archaeologist to excavate mounds 2, 3, and 4 in 1938. In 1939, they came back and looked at this remarkable discovery made by Basil Brown originally. On the left at the bottom, you see Ralph Fiennes being Basil Brown in the film The Dig, which you may know about, and he did a remarkable job in my view. Basil Brown was a very remarkable character with a sixth, even a seventh sense of what constituted remains of human activity in the deep sand. Well, at a certain moment, the boat was publicized, got the academic or archaeological community got to hear about it, came down and visited, and sort of took over. Basil Brown was relegated to the steerage, and Charles Phillips and W.F. Grimes, Stuart Piggott, Peggy Piggott, they became the crew. And here you see them in the picture at work, and there's Mrs. Pretty, the landowner, and her friends overlooking the dig. Next one, please. So it's remarkable for its finds, and as Terry mentioned, in the British Museum you can see these laid out in all their splendor. I just want to really acquaint you with some of the aspects of these finds, because they do reflect on what we expect of the boat builders who built the great ship. So if you see, this is the Great Gold Buckle, and you can see the way the animals are treated here. We're all interlaced, but not exactly symmetrically, but they give a puzzle to the eye, which is part of the artistry. Next one, please. And here you see the shoulder clasps, where there are, again, made of gold with garnet inset. I'm sure some of you have seen these finds before, but they bear showing again, I think. And you see there the animals all chained round the outside of the square. And then at each end, you've got this fascinating sort of heraldic motif. Next one, please. I've just drawn it out here for you to see. You see there is two, I don't know if you can see them, but there's two wild boars here, head and the back and the little curly tail. And if you look at this next picture, it shows you how it was sort of designed by the artist. Next one, please. You see, there they are. They're sort of crossed over with each other, and you can see each one has a tusk at the head as well as a little curly tail. So these are animals which have meaning, that they are protective, they're fierce, they inspire and protect the person that wears the shoulder clasp. Next one, please. And a lot of symbolic objects which are unique. The helmet you see on the left-hand side there, with its dragon going over the crown of the head, and the bird of prey, unusually a bird with teeth, which is exposed on the face of the person, so that the wings are the eyebrows, and the nose is the body, and the tail is the moustache. On the right-hand side, you see a scepter. It's a whetstone, not a used whetstone, but a whetstone, little stag on the top of it, and a little sort of upturned saucer on the bottom, interpreted as a scepter, and the faces carved on it are interpreted as ancestors. So this is a very important moment in the story of England. Sutton Hoo belongs to the 7th century, and by that time, 200 years have passed since the English migrated into England. So they've settled down, they're farming, and they're beginning to form kingdoms. And we think that Sutton Hoo is evidence, direct evidence for this. Next one, please. And so to the ship. All these treasures were found amidships. They were found in a collapsed a sort of chamber made of large timbers, which had almost completely rotted away. So that what they excavated was a kind of sandwich with these finds in it. The same thing was true of the boat. So the boat is an amazing vessel, 90 foot long, 27 meters. And it was originally built of oak, but the oak planks had rotted away. Instead, though, it was possible to see the lines of the planks with the little iron rivets that remained. In fact, the first thing that Basil Brown realized about this ship was that it was held together with iron rivets when John Jacobs, one of his assistants from Mrs. Pretty's house, held up a lump of rust and said, "Here's a piece of iron." And from then on, the chase was on. Each rivet was lovingly dusted down with a pasted brush. And so the lines of the rivets gave the form of the boat. Next one, please. So here you see Basil in the background, and in the foreground there's Charles Phillips, and Commander Hutchinson, who was brought in to record the ship itself. Next one, please. And so on the left-hand side, you see Phillips and Hutchinson both in the ship, and they're beginning to try and dissect it to find out what its particularities were, what were the components, what happened at the stem, what happened at the stern. And basically, it's a ship with a number of ribs crossing it. So it's got a hull built of planks, and the ribs form a frame inside the hull. And everything was held together with these rivets. And on the bottom right-hand corner, you can see a picture of them. Basically, it's an iron nail, wrought iron nail, and then it has this triangular rove, so-called, with a hole in it. So you want to join two planks. You drive the nail through the two planks, usually prepared with a spoon bit drill, and then put the rove over the point of the nail. And then with one person each side, a brave person holding an iron dolly, one side holding the head of the nail, the other one and slams it over the nail so that it squashes down on the rove, and then you've got a very tight. Next one, please. The diagnosis that this was a rowing boat came mainly from the kind of shadow in the sand that you see top left in this picture. It's shaped like a thorn, and the idea is that in the curvy part, that's where the oar rests, and you pull against it. It must have had some kind of leather fastener as well, for the oar not to jump away. Well, that was seen during the 1939 excavation. And in between 1965 and 71, a British Museum team came back to Sutton Hoo and started to dissect a ship to find out all they possibly could about it. And the result of that was the large report published in 1975, the chapter by Angela Evans in particular, who led on the research of the ship. And that's formed our Bible, our blueprint, where we go back to check anything that might have been important for the rebuild. And also a large collection of photographs taken by Mercy Lack and Barbara Wagstaff, two visiting teachers who took all these photographs. They've all been scanned now, and they're with the National Trust, who own the site of Sutton Hoo. So we're now in quite a good position to attempt our rebuild. Next one, please. That's just a little sight of the ship with its ribs. These ribs, by the way, they're not wood either. They were wood, but they've left this kind of crusty bar running across the ship, which gives you an idea of where they were. And they're evenly spaced, so definitely part of the original build. And there's one of the rivets on the right-hand side there. So how are we going to reconstruct this ship? Why are we reconstructing this ship? And how long is it going to take? And what is it going to tell us? Those are the questions I'm going to try and run over with you. Next one, please. Well, in order to carry this out, we formed the Sutton Hoo Ships Company, which is a charity. It's a charity and company limited by guarantee. So it's going back to the old days in some ways, in the way that we used to get archaeology going with contributions and so forth. And it was originally formed, or the initiative, well, it came from two directions. First of all, I was determined to have a reconstruction of this ship as part of our project when the University of York was given the responsibility for the renewed excavations in 1983 to 1992, which encompassed a number of mounds, but we also revisited all the earlier evidence as well. So very shortly after starting in 83, I started to sound people out. Should we rebuild this ship? And I don't say everybody was particularly enthusiastic. Academics are often rather conservative about this sort of thing. They're very suspicious of any rebuild that might be interpreted as a vanity project. And of course, that's a possibility. So I learned a little bit about what was happening in the general world of reconstructed historic ships and what it was being done for. Now, I don't say that we followed it exactly, but you'll soon see whether you believe our approach to be the right one. Next one, please. So here we have the three major players in the Sutton Hoo Ships Company. In the foreground, slightly cut off by the slide, is our treasurer, Andrew Fitzgerald, then the shipwright, Tim Kirk, and then in the background, you see Jack Barnard, who's the project manager. Now, these are the key players in the ship's company. I mean, I'm the chairman, but they are the, so to speak, the motor of the operation. Next one, please. So here's Tim enjoying a joke with some of the 70 volunteers that we have. These are volunteers who've turned up. They're mostly local because then they can attend in the big shed where we're building this ship when they're needed. They are mostly people who've never built a ship of any kind before. Tim Kirk is the exception. He's an experienced boat builder, particularly of timber ships, and he's got an assistant, Laurie Walker, who's also an experienced boat builder. So we've got two professionals who know how to build a boat, although of course they've never built a 7th century boat. So the other volunteers that you see here are very special in this project. It's not just that we are giving people a bit of fun. What we are finding is that very soon after they come and learn how to use an axe, learn how to use a draw knife and the tool we've created. We base these tools on Anglo-Saxon examples. They learn how to use them, and then they learn how the wood is and how to follow the grain, how to recognize knots, how to recognize stresses in the timber, how to recognize faults in the timber too. And then when it comes to shaping them, there is something about the timbers themselves which suggest the shape they should be. Now, I'm saying this because, as you know, the ship remains were simply stains in the ground where wood had been. So although we get the form of the ship, we don't get the shape of each individual timber. And these volunteers, they are as valuable as trawlers on an archaeological excavation in that they don't come with fixed ideas about what anything should look like. And they shape the timbers suggest the shape they need to be to join other timbers. And so in that sense, the ship is teaching us. Next one, please. We also have the plan that was made in 1939. I don't think it's come out very well, but its original plan is absolutely beautiful. It hasn't come out very well on my slide, but you can see the shapes there. Everything was drawn very carefully. Everything was measured in feet and inches and fractions of an inch, all the rivets and so on. And then from that, Pat Tanner and Julian Whitewright of Southampton University put together a digital model from which we've referred to when we build. We haven't followed it slavishly, but it's been really useful. Next one, please. So how does the reconstruction of a ship work? So it isn't simply that a site plan exists, and so we follow that exactly. We've got photographs from the excavation. That's always useful. We've got a digital model. That's quite useful too. We've got other ships which are relevant to Sutton Hoo, such as the Newdam ship, which you see bottom right. That's also a rowing boat. This is the kind of boat in which the early Saxons would skid across the Baltic and the North Sea and do a bit of raiding, particularly of Roman sites. Now, all that information is not scientifically transferable to a new ship to a reconstructed ship, you have to have somebody who understands how ships work. And that's the importance of the shipwright, Tim, as you see there. So all this information is really assembled and digested by Tim, is discussed a lot, of course, with the volunteers and the assistant, Laurie, and all of us trustees as well, occasionally when it's needed. And it's him who has in his mind the way the ship should be shaped. Now, I'm trying to get across the idea that nothing is dogmatic here. What happens is you make the best of the evidence that you've got and you converge it and you meld it with what an experienced shipbuilder knows is needed for a clinker-built rowing boat, and a clinker-built rowing boat which is probably going to sea. Next one, please. So why are we reconstructing it? Well, the first reason already mentioned by Terry is that the Sutton Hoo ship is the only find in the Sutton Hoo Mine 1 chamber and burial which hasn't been reconstructed. Remember the helmet, look here, this is how they found the helmet in a load of little sherds of rusty iron, top left there. They did a 1947 a version, which you see there with staring eyes. And then 1971, after the 60s, looked more like a sensible version of a biker helmet. It's obviously been reconstructed in the same way that the ship is going to be. What we've got, how it fits together, and what other helmets we can refer to, which make us more confident that our reconstruction is correct. Next one, please. So just to remind you that this is not the first time that that sort of thing has been done. This is a Hertzspring boat. It's an Iron Age ship. It's paddled rather than rowed. It was found in lots and lots and lots of pieces because it was made basically from linden, from lime, and sewn together. So you can imagine, left to this picture, what a challenge those excavators had. They were led by Early Crown in Pedersen, and they produced an amazing looking giant canoe, which was paddled in the water. 18 paddlers, did 6 to 7 knots, and they could do 57 strokes a minute. Very good. All the best of luck to them. We're not going to be doing that. Next one, please. So the next thing is, of course, there's a family of ships in the North Sea and the Baltic, and there are other ships too in the Channel and in the Atlantic area as well, which can act as exemplars for our ship. So just as they looked for different helmets when they were reconstructing the helmet, so we've been looking at different ships, particularly the ones that come before Sutton Hoo. But it's not without interest to look at the whole sequence in the Baltic and the North Sea. The earliest we've got is New Dam, 75 foot long, dated 320. Then it's Sutton Hoo would come after that, buried 625. After that comes Kvalsund, you see there, originally thought to be buried in 690, but now realize that it's at least the end of the 8th century and even the beginning of the 9th century. So it's very much closer than we thought to Oseberg, which is the first ship that definitely was designed for sailing. Now, I think it's important, we'll come to this in a minute, but I think it's important to distinguish between ships that are designed for sailing and any ship that can be sailed using a piece of cloth and a following wind. So there is a bit of a development there to explore. So at 820, that's 500 years later than New Dam, the Oseberg ship was took to the water, and then it gave rise to very much faster and more streamlined sailing ships, which the Vikings used, like Gokstad there, dated to the early the late 9th century, and it's 76 foot long. So Sutton Hoo is longer than any of these, and as far as we know, it's a rowing boat which might have sailed. Next one, please. So why construct? Well, I gave you a slight prelude on this. It's very interesting for volunteers to take part in this reconstruction. They are learning by doing, and in the process, the ship is teaching us how these timbers need to be shaped and fastened together. So you see, these are volunteers working on the keel. You see here, it comes as a piece of curved timber selected from an oak wood. The tree is selected, it's selected for its curved qualities. And so the keel is made up, it's like a big thick beam, really. It's made up of 5 bits. Next one, please. Sorry, I'll show you a bit more about those in just a minute. And then why reconstruct number 4 is a question of aesthetics. Now, this is something that interests me very greatly because the finds in the chamber at Sutton Hoo Mound 1 were incredibly beautiful, as well as exquisitely well made. And therefore, it does seem that we ought to be looking at the ship in this light. One of the things that always impresses me is that when the rivets were found in the ground, the rows, the diamond-shaped plate which closes them, they were all aligned with their long axes parallel to the keel. That's quite a hard thing to do. And so basically there is an artistic mind at work here, trying to achieve the same kind of symmetry as you find in the textiles, bottom right, and also something we think of the animal life that is expressed by the dragon on the shield and other of the animals that we've been looking at. Now, we're bearing all these things in mind in our reconstruction. Next one, please. So if you look at the bottom here, you can see a piece of ornament from the Sutton Hoo burials, and it's I hope you can see the ribbon animals are going along the handle. And those are the kinds of animals that we plan to put along the side of the ship, along the gunwale, and along the stem and stern posts. And at the top, you can see an actual thole used for rowing, decorated with a face, and that comes from Gokstad. So that's a later one, but as you see, these are the sort of places which are ornamented. So I think our resolution is that we dare to decorate and therefore make a ship that is more than just simply a vessel that floats. Next one, please. So I'm just going to show you a few pictures now of the timbers coming in. The oak's been provided by farmers in East Anglia, wonderful people who've donated them. And Steve, if you press the button on the bottom left of each of these, you can see the thing in action. Both of these have a bit of, yeah, that's it, just press it. You'll see a person. Okay. Oh, thank you. Yes. Okay. That's us getting started, and it's continuing here in these next pictures. They are splitting the logs and trimming them with an axe. And the skill of these axe trimmers it's so good that the oak that comes in as green oak ends up as a piece of varnished timber, beautifully shaped, smoothly shaped. It's amazing. It looks like a piece of furniture. Next one, please. Next one. Thank you. Okay, so here are people working again, and on the right-hand side, you see the keel fashioned from its original shape as a beam into a T shape, so that it can fasten the lowest planks, the so-called garboard planks, to it. Next one, please. So here you see the stem post rising up, and there on the bottom right, some of the trial pieces that we're doing to see what the animal ornament would look like there. Next one, please. So here's a picture of the ship in February 2022. You start with the keel, 5 pieces, flat at the bottom, curved right up at each end, 90 foot long. And then we'll be adding the planks to the keel, and those black bits you see there in the picture, they guide the shape of the plank. So each of these planks has got to be bent in 2 directions. It's absolutely not at all unauthentic to have some guides like these molds, so-called, and that's what will be the planking. Once the planking is at the top, the gunnel, the top bit will be fitted, then the frames will be fitted. They take the form of these black plywood molds, and they're in 2 bits. There's a futtock which takes it down from the gunnel. All these terms, by the way, don't be worried about them. It sounds complicated. It is quite complicated, but it sounds more complicated than it is. And if you come as a volunteer here, you're only there about a week before you can start talking about ribs and frames and strakes and planks and futtocks and so on. So it's quite fun. Next one, please. So the ship has been launched. I think what we're aiming for is 2024 for the launch. So it'll be taken out of that long shed and put on the River Deben initially. The question is, what are we going to do next? And I'm going to finish my talk by just telling you something of what's going to happen after we've got the ship in the water. Next one, please. Why are we rowing it, first of all? Why aren't we sailing? Well, we know it was a rowing ship. We also know that inland and coastal waters link to history rather better than the middle of the sea, because it's got places which have Anglo-Saxon history attached to them. We're going to be testing some of the main arterial routes, which of course are the rivers. It'll promote rowing, which is sometimes thought of as rather an elitist sport, but definitely doesn't have to be. And so we are going to hopefully use our boat to attract people to the sport. And also I think we're going to hopefully promote care of rivers. Rivers are in the press every now and again now because people are rewilding them. I think we want more than that. I think we want some more conservation so that the banks are not destroyed by motorboats, but instead we use rowing boats as a way of traveling on them, quiet and in keeping and in sympathy and in tune with the environment. Next one, please. So rowing has all sorts of attachments. You can row it, you can tow it, you can put it on the land and pull it. So all these things were done with krampmacken, which was a Gotlandic 13th century reconstruction. They went all the way, next one please. They went all the way to Constantinople, now Istanbul, and just to prove that it could be done by the rivers. Like a lot of experimental archaeology, it rather depends on what's available. So the river's got to still be a river, and it can't be canalized so narrow you can't use it. And it's got to be a river through which you're allowed to pass. Next one, please. So what are we going to do? Well, here's on the left-hand side is the program, and on the right-hand side is the trials. The program is going to have 2021, the keel is laid. 2022, we'll start building the hull. 2023, do the framing and the benches on which the rowers are going to sit. Then the first year, 2024, it's launched, and we're going to spend a nice long time trying to get people to row together. Now, according to the excavators, this ship should have had 40 oars, 20 each side. That is, if the oars were evenly spaced along each side, each gunwale. There may not have been, in which case the chamber area would have been left free and the boat propelled with 14 oars each end, 28 in all. We don't know if that would work, but that's the point of having the experiment. There's quite a good argument for having only 28 oars and keeping the central area free. That has got to have in it the way the tents, the weapons, if we're a fighting ship. If it's not a fighting ship, it's got to have a platform on which the king can recline as he is rowed ceremonially up the river. So it's a good reason for trying these things out. Anyway, the difficult part is to try and get even 28 people to row together. I'm sure all of you have been for a picnic with your family. I know I have, and there's 4 of us rowing there. And I don't think we've ever been in time in years of trying. So the idea of 28 people managing it together, well, that's a fond hope, let's say. We're going to have a whole year training. The oars, moreover, are all different lengths because you are further away from the water at each end and nearer the water towards the center. So the oars can be as long as 5 meters, quite a challenge. Well, when we've mastered the rowing, we're going to take the ship to different places. Those different places are suggested by the early history of Anglo-Saxon England. The boat is made in East Anglia. East Anglia had other kingdoms around it. It had Wessex, it had Mercia, it had Northumbria. And some of these kingdoms were permanently at war with each other. So our first journey will be up the Thames into Wessex, under London Bridge. The next journey will be up the coast, up the Humber and up the Trent. And just at that point, you can see in the middle of the picture there are 3 X's. Those are 3 battles fought between East Anglia, Mercia and Northumbria, which they're recorded. And then the third big journey will start actually up the Humber again and up the Ouse. We plan to come to York. And then the same adventure, we'll go up the coast and visit Whitby and Hartlepool, Monk Wearmouth, Jarrow, the early monasteries of Northumbria. So these trials will not just be trying it out, it'll also be telling something of the story of early England. Then we go to sailing trials and portage trials and eventually the exhibition of the ship. So very quickly, I'm just going to look at sailing. Next one, please. So Edwin and Joyce Gifford made a half-size version of the Sutton Hoo ship. Here it is, the Sailwolfing it was called. It does sail, but of course you don't know that that actually works with the full size. Next one, please. We know that there are lots of creeks all around the River Deben. We've got to be able to maneuver in those. Next one, please. We know that there was a lot of crossing going on between the early kingdoms of the 7th and the 8th century. Next one, please. We know that they had points of entry into the island of Britain and sea areas made famous by the late night weather forecast. I've put them on this map here: Rockall, Bailey, Hebrides, so on. And the little arrows show where you could come in. So there is a prima facie reason for believing that the island of Britain itself is a navigational highway round its coasts. Next one, please. Now, we may not, we also know about this period that they did navigate. They knew how to cross the North Sea using the sun. They knew how to get to Iceland using the geese who were migrating up and down. The actual winds favor the Scandinavians in that they blow towards Britain in the spring and they blow back towards Scandinavia in the autumn. So all these interesting navigational hints give us a feeling that the North Sea was a place that you could go on. Next one, please. So I'm all for sailing, but I did have a rather unfortunate experience doing it myself. This was the voyage of the Oseberg replica. Here it is, top left, sailing away, top right, trying to tack, bottom left, capsizing, sinking and disappearing without trace, and bottom right being rescued, actually by a ferry, as well as our own escort vessel, which was lingering behind. So this famous episode has been on television and much enjoyed by other archaeologists. I don't know that I'd like to see it again. On the other hand, it is remarkable that a boat can capsize with such ease. And if you want to know why it did, as you try and come closer to the wind, the boat is pushed over and water enters through the oar ports. If you're holding the sheet, that's the bottom right-hand corner of the sheet of the sail, as it's trying to push you over, then what it does is it drags you across the deck. And in this case, the person holding the sheet got bored of being dragged across the deck and put it in a cleat, which was not a good idea. So the boat then capsized and went to the bottom. And luckily, no one was actually drowned, but they could have been. Next one, please. So I'm a cautious sailor, but I want the project as a whole to give what's interesting results. The Flagship and the trials are going to contribute to early history, and they're going to contribute to the social impact, sustainable transport, good health, things like that. So don't try and read all these different things. You can get the idea. This is a mind map of what we hope to achieve. Next one, please. So just to finish off with, I just want to read you a translation. Next one, please. This is a translation of a poem called The Seafarer. Comes from the Exeter book. So it's an Anglo-Saxon poem. It's written in Old English. And it can be interpreted in quite a large number of different ways. So I feel free to give you my version of what I think it was like. And basically, I'm voicing the thoughts of a salt-caked sea captain in the pub with a large pint, asked what's it like to be an Anglo-Saxon seafarer. I'll tell you about life on the sea. It's grim. Many a long day I've suffered at the end of an oar, fearfully managing wind and wave, or at nightfall, doubled up in the bows, peering at passing cliffs. With freezing feet and pangs of hunger, trapped in a boat, nothing to hear but hail and spray. No pals but gannets, no laughs but the screech of gulls, no helping hand. You do a lot better on land, I tell you. Sitting at a table, pushing out the wine with fellow traders, you've no idea what we go through. Yet when the cuckoo calls, we're off again, leaving the blossom, never seeing the fruit, missing the glint of rings, the love of women, the fellowship of the cup, all this to brave the sea in its tricky ways. But then the swell takes us, lifting us over the water onto our bearing, pulling, heaving, lurching towards the horizon, and the heart lifts. Profit and admiration are earned through the perils of seafaring. It's not without honor. Sure, a boat can go to the bottom, but life on land ends too, in illness, in old age, in a fight. It ends for earls, for kings, for emperors, no less than seafarers. None escapes life ends. White hair, pale face, bent body, muttering grievances, old friends gone before. Tip gold into his grave if you must. You won't bring him back. But at sea, the whole ocean is there to mourn you. So next one, please. I think I don't want you to feel gloomy about that. I think that does express quite nicely the perils and also the excitement of going to sea in Anglo-Saxon times. And of course, what we hope is that we could replicate some of that. Not just learn from our research, but also learn from the kind of feelings that our experiment will generate in everybody who participates. And we hope some of you will do that. My last slide asks you to come and see us, follow our progress, volunteer if you like to. We need rowers and support us if you can. Thank you very much.
Martin, thank you. That's really wonderful. We have a good number of questions stacked up, and I'll take these, perhaps not quite in the order they come up, but try and put some logic to them. First one up. Can you hear me all right, Martin? Are you with me?
Yes, I'm still here.
Yeah, good. That's fine.
Yeah, I am. I'm unmuted.
Yep. Right. First one up. Then there's a question of Wayne Darley posted actually quite early on in the talk. How far from the river was the ship found, and has it been estimated how many people would have been needed to move it to its final resting place?
Yes, it's roughly about half a kilometre from the present flood bank. The river's been canalised like so many, and so the river has become narrower, and the land that was river has been reclaimed. So maybe it was a bit closer beforehand. On the other hand, the hill, or the promontory, I should say, which is at a 30 meters, 100-foot contour, you still got to go up that somehow. So as for the number of people who were needed, it has been estimated, but not very scientifically. It varies between 500 people plus 250 horses. And if in doubt, a large tank might just do it. So we don't know, as the short answer.
That's really quite a story, isn't it? Right. Okay. So a very considerable number of people anyway.
Yes, it will be. We need your help.
Yeah, indeed. A couple of points on the wood itself here, a couple of questions which link quite nicely. Annie asks, is the way oak timber splits predictable, or were there some disasters in the course of your replica work?
There were some disasters. I should say, first of all, that we know it was oak because the oaks left its grain on the iron of the rivets. So in case you're wondering, that's how we know it's oak. Also, the Anglo-Saxons called their ships, especially the bigger ones, oaks. Here's a fleet of oaks coming. So we think that the oak, we're pretty certain it was oak. Makes it very heavy, of course. The logic of the splitting, well, we cheat a little bit because we do split the oaks by hand, but we saw the end off. And that means you can see the rings of the grain, and you can see the grain as well. So you started off with an axe, then you put the wedges and then you bang it in, and that splits it. And if you can keep splitting it along the line of the grain, like we do with the planks as well as the keel, then you know you've got the strongest kind of timber. So it also has to be curved in some cases, as I was saying, with the keel. And that does mean a certain amount of working of the bend timber has to happen. And in that case, it does happen that because you start with something rectangular, you have to make a sloped, let's say, sort of U-shaped channel in the top of it in order to fasten the garboard planks, the first two planks, the bottom planks. They can't be fastened directly, otherwise they just stand straight vertically up. So they've got to be fastened on a sort of T-piece. That means you have to scoop it out. And when you scoop out the timber, you think you've got a beautiful piece of timber, and you have, but it can have faults which don't show in the surface, but you do come upon when you're hollowing or planing. And it's difficult to know what to do. I mean, we have a case quite recently, and I think we've probably found a replacement. People always ask, well, what would the Anglo-Saxons do, you know, if they found one of these timbers was faulty? And assuming the one like for his head, I think those off there, I said. Have you lost me?
No, you dipped out for a moment there, but you're back.
Have I lost? Oh, dipped out of that. Okay. Well, I was just saying that. Am I okay now?
Yeah, you're okay now. Yeah.
Okay. I was just saying that sometimes you do encounter these faults, and then you have to decide whether to repair or replace. Yeah, so the answer to the question is yes, you do, of course, find faults, and you have to decide that. On the whole, so far, we've tended to want to replace as conforming to our idea of perfection. But I'm sure the time will come when a repair is essential.
Yeah.
So these little variations from the ancestors to modern times, I think, are permitted as long as you're not drastically reshaping the ship or equipping it for something you didn't know it did.
Yeah. On a related note, Britta asks, adds that it's utterly fascinating, asks, using green wood, how do you deal, and perhaps how did the ancient shipwrights deal with the wood drying and potentially cracking?
Excellent question. So what the shipwright and the company do is they first of all explore the stands where the trees are, and then they get the agreement of the farmer, the landowner, that they can have such and such a tree. They then mark it and leave it growing as long as possible, so that it comes in green and is almost immediately split and made into planks. That's the plan.
Yeah,
it's quite difficult to time, I have to say, but that is the plan, and so far it's worked quite well. You can also store the green timber in a place where it's out of the sun and in a sort of damp environment, in a farmer's shed and so on. We've tried that too, and I think, but it is true. It is a worry. Once it starts to dry out, then it's very hard to work.
I wonder perhaps if these ships got into the water as soon as possible on completion.
Yes, that's a very good point.
That's
well,
just
of course,
speculation.
Like better.
Purely speculation.
No, I think we'll want to do that. I think we may need to spray it, actually. All right.
Yeah, that's a thought. What about caulking? Katrina Copping asks how the joints going to ensure water doesn't get in. Are you going to be caulking the planks?
Yes, we've experimented with various materials, and I think the present view is that cloth soaked in linseed oil and beef fat makes the best kind of greasy rag that you put between the two planks and hammer home.
Right. A lovely combination. Moving on from sort of construction a wee bit, Michelle asks, will you take the ship to the north of Northumbria, that is into present-day Scotland?
Well, yeah, I'd love to do that. I think you've hit upon a flaw in my plan, which is that actually rowing all this way is not going to be that simple, and it's going to take a lot of time. So I think we will do some coastal rowing, because it's important to experiment with the idea of a reserve crew in the middle of the boat, which is, I should have mentioned, was one of the most important uses of it. You can't row forever. You need a break, and you have to row with the tide. So you probably only get about 30-40 miles rowing, and even then you'll need a reserve crew. And then you've got to stop and wait the next tide. So camp on a beach. So one of the things we want our volunteers to do is to reconnoiter these rivers so that we can work out stepping stones, so to speak, on the beaches of the East Coast. So we always have a place to stop, place to rest, place to camp, and then continue. And I think we'll have to do that actually for year 3 anyway, to get us to the Humber. And then if there's a year 4, well, it would be wonderful. However, by the time we get to that, I think we will have worked out whether we can sail, and if so, how. We need to be able to sail safely, and that will mean knowing quite a lot about the winds, because I suspect we won't really be able to convincingly tack, but I think we will be able to use the wind. If that's the case, then we can come up to the north.
So it's going to be quite a lot of trial and error, isn't it? And hoping for the best, I think.
More trial than error, I hope.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Time's running on, but I want to just turn a little bit to the burial, the excavation itself. A couple of people are asking fairly detailed questions about Radwald and whether or not we think he was Radwald, I beg your pardon, whether or not he was buried there. Do you think we'll ever know for sure? Is it still a reasonable supposition that it's his burial?
I think yes. I think a reasonable supposition. It's an exceptionally rich burial, but also has symbolic objects in it, which do suggest a leader and a warrior of some kind of importance. It's in East Anglia, so it's a leader in East Anglia. It's buried about 625, and what we know about leaders in East Anglia around that time is in a king list, of which the most likely king to be died, well, we know he died in between 624 and 625, and that fits with the art historian's view of the date of the metalwork. So we haven't got, well, we've got a little bit of radiocarbon, but it hasn't been much use because there isn't enough organic material. But I think so it's never going to be completely certain. None of these burials are kind of signed. But Redwald also fits in a number of other ways. He was a member of the Woffingers, and he was a leader of some repute. He was thought to be important enough to be designated a Bretwalder, a ruler of Britons, if that's exactly what it means. And then he was also famous for his sort of dithering about whether it was a good idea to be Christian.
Yeah. And
he seemed to be an extremely pragmatic person. I mean, he went to Kent to find out about this Christianity and was told that it was really good for trade. And so he came back and he got converted. And then he came back, told his wife. His wife wasn't best pleased. She was a more astute politician than him, I think it's fair to say. And even Bede, who tells the stories about her, is quite admiring, if a bit grudging in his admiration. And she told him there's no point in alienating all our allies just because you met somebody interesting in Kent. I think what we need to do is we have to work carefully to make sure we keep our own people on board. And she advised him again in other ways, but maybe that's for another occasion.
Hedging your bets, rather. Yes, Martin. Thank you so much. Time's absolutely up. My apologies, there are still a few questions there unanswered. We've got through as many as we could in the time available. Martin, on behalf of all of us, thank you so much for a fascinating, very engaging talk. Sutton Hoo ship burial is apparently so well known, of course, famous, but it's wonderful and important, I think, to be reminded how much more there is to learn and how relevant Basil Brown's work still is. So thank you so much on behalf of a substantial audience for really bringing us up to date on this extraordinary reconstruction work and what we hope
to make sure. It's a great pleasure, and do say to the audience that if they want to email me, they're very welcome. If they've got questions they'd like to, I was not able to take them today.
Yeah.
So thank you all very much for coming, and thank you, Terry, and thank you to York for this invitation.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you so much. If you'd like to help support the reconstruction of the Sutton Hoo ship, I think the details have been put in the chat here. And of course, for the festival as a whole, we hope that you'll continue to be engaged with us. We'll check out the website. That's York Festival of Ideas, all one word, .com, for full details of all the remaining events in the festival programme. There's still things happening, and we'd love to hear what you think of them. That's it from us for this event. Thank you for joining us, and